we'll go quickly to questions. Pierre, that was fantastic. Education and connection to food, to land, to farming families, that's really what it boils down to. So a couple of questions. I think, Caroline, seeing as you've probably not asked a question yet, we'll let you have one. Have we got any mics? There we go. Thank you.
Fascinating. You know, I love the country benchmarking, so well done, everybody. Got a question for Hans. Sorry, you've got a strip the willow injury. Got a question for Hans. So you talk about farm accommodation mainly. We know that in countries, you know, there's more to it than accommodation. You know, in Scotland we cover everything from tours and wedding venues and people kayaking and lochs and everything. So how do you put up some data there. So my question is, how do you measure the wider thing? Do you include farm retail? And how do you measure the multiplier effects? We heard from Shpresim about, you know, for every farm that is supported, they're supporting 22 other farms in the region. So how do you measure in Austria in particular the multiplier effects of the supply chain and the people that are coming to the rural economy and not just in accommodation?
Yes, good question, thank you. Well, we concentrate on overnights on the farms, but we try to cooperate closely with those who are selling farming produce. We did have, some years ago, an app, like a rural experience, where you had the direct sellers, where you had restaurants in the regions, where you had wineries, organic farms. So we're trying to cooperate and to work with them. Then it was not politically desired. So it was turned down a bit. We tried to rebuild it again because new government. It's measured sometimes. I think, Alexander, you looked at the indirect effects as well of farm holidays when they did the research for this Austrian auditor's office who asked, why do you get these subsidies? We have figures from tax that subsidies in the rural regions come back at almost 100% in form of tax, because the money is all spent in the region. In the hotels, I mean, the hoteliers, they have a yacht in the Mediterranean, and for their children, flats in Vienna. Farmers usually stay where they are and use things. But there we could have more information. I mean, I look at Erika or Alexander, the researchers. So it's quite, maybe it has to do with this developed market that we look so narrowly at our field, you know.
Can I just ask you to wait just so everyone at the back can hear? Thank you.
The concept in Austria of holiday on the farm is really on overnight stay. I think that's a key, to stay overnight. But if we look into the statistic, it was presented earlier today, that in the farm structure survey, there are also additional leisure activities or health or educational service, so recorded. We have them for Austria and also at the European Union level.
Sorry, Caroline. I'm the marketing man, you know. I love to sell things and how much money, you know, and show that. But in the work we do, there is an incredible amount of questions for research. I mean, look at Alexander. They could work for us for years, you know, the whole teams, because there's so much which needs to be researched. We calculate the things very bluntly. I think I explained it to you, that we said over the years, if the price had been increased just by the inflation from our members, they would have a price of 30 euros. But in actual fact, they have a price of 60 euro through our work. So we say the added value which we create is 30 euros. If you multiply this by the 2.5 million overnights we have, we create every year an added value of 75 million euros, and we only get subsidies of 1.2 million. So we say to the minister, this is profitable, isn't it? So, but we argue very much in our interest, I'd say, but there is much field to compare with others as well.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the Minister.
I'm very interested in some of the legislative enablers for farms to diversify into agritourism. And obviously, Pierre, you mentioned that Ontario and Quebec had particular legislation. I imagine there may be legislation in other countries, in Austria and Albania as well. I'm interested in where, if you put tax aside, maybe where some of the enablers are in the legislation for people to diversify, then maybe bring down the barriers to that.
I'm not sure what the question is.
How has the legislation enabled farms to diversify into agritourism, is the question. Because that's what I'm looking at as Minister for Rural Affairs in Scotland.
Okay, I'm quite familiar with the Ontario situation, and their legislation is about trying to reduce the risk because, you know, visitors are going onto a working farm. They're not going to a retail complex where everything is flat and safe and it's very little risk of injury. But we're talking about of a working farm with equipment operating and so on, and animals, livestock, and people can get injured. So this legislation in Ontario basically states publicly that you are going onto operate a working farm. Now that does not take the risk off the farm of not providing a safe environment with proper barriers and signage and preparing everything. But I mean, you know, people are parking out on fields, and it's not a paved or bricked sort of just at the beginning. And our tourism minister in Alberta, new tourism minister, we were been talking to him, and he's quite interested in this. And he went to a agritourism farm, and he got out of his vehicle and he kind of twisted his ankle a little bit, and he goes, "Oh, I get it." So he wants to bring that same legislation to our province in Alberta. And you know, I didn't mention another even more recent thing happening is our province, our producer group, Alberta Farm Fresh Producers, rebranded themselves as Agritourism Alberta. So now we're professionalizing agritourism, so then we can advocate and as well as to provide supports to our members and so on, and our new members. So if that helps. Yeah.
Can we ask the same question to the others on the panel? Because I think it's, if there's anything that your governments have done to help.
We have a very good example. Letting out private rooms is no restriction at all. It helps a lot. Up to 10 beds, you can simply start. You open room and you start the activity. These days you will not be so successful anymore, but in former days it worked. People would just walk in. But now these 10 beds are a problem for us because we need this to be bigger. We want 16 beds like they have it in Italy. This is one. The other one is the land use legislation. No licensed farm is allowed in rural space. So the limit is 10 beds. And with 10 beds, they cannot build the same playground and they have less money for development. So there we are restricted. There's a great chance for rural development, which we cannot use due to the legislation, which is a problem, where we are lobbying, have been lobbying for a long time. As it would be a great chance. Safety security is not the big issue. All our member farms have to be controlled by the social insurance of the farmers. So they need to be controlled. And I've been doing this for 35 years. We didn't have one serious accident, not at all. So that helped. But legislation is a big issue because when it works well, people love to develop and to grow. And when we say grow, 16 beds in Austria mean no external labor. You run it with the family, no others. Only on weekends when you change the guests, you can sort of employ them for a day or so. This is allowed. So we would say no guests and no... how to call that? No menu, so that there is no hygiene risk. They don't open a restaurant. This would not be allowed. Because in their private activity, you can cook. It's like you're visiting a family, you stay with them. They can have lunch, they can have dinner if they like. That's all free up to 10 beds, which is helpful. But as it works so well, we are complaining again. So if you do the law, when you make 10 beds, I promise you, in 10 years' time, they will come and say, it works so well, you cannot have it at 10 beds. It must be 15. So.
And Shpresim?
Yeah, thank you. To build up what kind of policy and approach you policymakers wants to get in touch with the private sector, I would strongly suggest to start with addressing the question what concerns most the farmer that wants to be transformed into agritourism. Because the farmer and agritourism are totally different things. A farmer concerns that when start thinking to offer services, it doesn't naturally fit on a producer to start offering services. So capacity building development program should be the first thing thinking about. Scottish Agritourism, for example, has this kind of power, and through them you might transfer your support in these terms to the private sector. And then what others concerns a farmer? Fiscal issues, taxes, and so forth. I don't know your case, but generally speaking, every kind of enterprises does pay taxes. And if you reduce them, but now the question, what kind of taxes are we talking about? In Albania, for example, when the sector started development, the permission, reconstruction, construction was a main issue. Not the only one, but the main. So the policymakers thought, well, there are a lot of taxes, but this one is the main one. Let's wave it away. And the tax for permission and reconstruction was erased. Even the profit, which was done, but the permission was the most important one. So just give the priority what is the most important for the moment, because after all, this is a process, endless sometimes. What else concerns the farm is the financial, where they should find the money to do what they want to do. Because if you want to transform your farm into agritourism, you should start thinking about accommodation. Accommodation is a big deal. You should start thinking about the recreational activities. So infrastructure always is there and needs some money. And what public sector might do, subsidies is just one thing. Grant schemes, for example, worked in Albania. It was a powerful financial tool that incentivized a lot of farmers, and not only, because it's not the only the farmer, the only one who provide agritourism, investors, urban guys that wants to come back to the rural area, and that's fantastic because you are bringing money in the rural area, and you incentivize these people through the grant schemes. So these are just shortly saying some of them. That happens in Albania. Thank you.
Thank you. Hans, did you want to say one last thing? Just
one
I'm really
sentence.
sorry when we have gone massively over time, but I'm going to just let the
These
two
additional
speakers.
effects are tremendous. I mean, in Austria, it has effects on the social pension system. Often the ladies on the farm don't have an own pension, and with rural tourism, they have a good own income. They pay into the pension system, and suddenly they have their own pension, which gives them so it's a dramatic effects which you don't even think of in the first place. You know?
To add to that, the benefit was too is, when you're a farmer, and I've been hanging out with farmers for 15 years in agritourism, they see their place as safe, right? And just on the safety side, talking about that. So I think this legislation is happening in Ontario that the rest of Canada is seeing and wanting to do this is an eye-opener for the operators, the farm operators. So it's forcing them to think about that, and then they can prepare their site for visitors in that way. But also, what's happening is we're seeing lawsuits for people, twisting their ankle, or if a chestnut falls on your head, oh my goodness, phone the lawyer. This is happening more and more in Canada. If I slip on a cow patty. There's a fellow that's suing a bison ranch operator at a private function, wasn't invited, but came along because one of his chums was invited, and he slipped on a cow patty, and he's upset, and he's suing. Now, having this will not stop that, but I mean, it makes a stronger case in front of the judge to say, hey, man, you know, this is a working farm. You know, you're going to have shit on the ground here. So, you know, those are the benefits. It's sometimes I'm not a big fan of regulations, but some regulations are, you know, they're helpful for both sides to protect the visitors and to protect the farm families as well.
So we're here for agritourism, and it's all about farming. So I think ending on farm manure is a good place to finish.